My truck's diesel engine knocked in the 20-degree cold, loud enough to turn heads in Agrotech's glass parking lot. Maggie squeezed my hand before we crossed the frozen gravel, her emerald dress rustling against my worn Carhartt. The lobby hit us with chemical warmth and the echo of expensive shoes on marble. Derek Chen intercepted us at the coat check, his Italian loafers clicking to a stop. He fingered my jacket like it carried disease. "Maggie, you brought your husband." His voice carried across the circle of executives. "How rustic." He extended his hand. I shook it, calloused farmer meeting soft corporate palm. He recoiled, wiped his fingers on his trousers. "Must be quite something," he said, loud enough for the room. "Having a wife who can afford this lifestyle." Maggie's jaw tightened. I sipped my cheap beer, silent. Across the lobby, Derek leaned toward the CFO, words drifting back through champagne-scented air. "Spring expansion depends on breaking these old-timers. Watch." He didn't know I owned the ground under his feet. Derek guided us toward a cluster of investors, his hand hovering near Maggie's elbow without quite touching. The presentation screen glowed behind the bar, blue corporate slides already queued up. "Gentlemen, meet our Senior Director of Community Relations." He gestured at Maggie like she was a prize heifer. "The brains behind our rural outreach strategy." Three men in $1,000 suits nodded. One offered me a pitying smile. "And this is her." Derek paused, theatrical. "Well, Franklin, isn't it? The farmer." "That's right." "Fascinating." The tallest investor swirled his scotch. "So you work the land yourself? Tractors and such?" "When it needs working." "How quaint." Derek's teeth showed. Maggie's always had a soft spot for authentic rural experience. Very grounded of her. I'd seen this dance before. Back in '82, a banker from Cincinnati tried the same routine at the grain elevator, talking past me to men he thought mattered more. That banker ended up selling insurance in Dayton. Derek clicked a remote. The screen shifted to a map dotted with red pins. "Our Q1 expansion targets," he announced, 23,000 acres across 3 counties. "We're revolutionizing agricultural efficiency through data-driven consolidation." The investors leaned forward. Maggie's smile stayed professional, but her hand found mine behind her back. "3 quick squeezes, our old signal, be patient." "Traditional family farming is dying," Derek continued. Wind rattled the glass walls behind him. "Aging landowners, outdated methods, resistance to technology. Our drone surveys and AI modeling identify underperforming parcels." He clicked again. A photo of a farmhouse, the Peterson place, 2 miles from ours. Old Jim Peterson, 76, widowed last spring. "We approach these situations with compassion, of course." Derek's voice dripped synthetic sympathy. "Offering fair market value plus relocation assistance. Most sellers are relieved. They're tired. They're alone. They're ready to let go." The Scotch drinker nodded. "Timeline?" "Aggressive. We need signed leases by April 15th to make spring planning projections." Derek smiled. "Fortunately, we have insider advantages, community trust, local connections." His eyes slid to me. "People like Franklin here could be quite helpful if they understood what's good for the community." The lobby air tasted like expensive cologne and ambition. My coffee had gone cold in its cheap ceramic mug. "The resistance we've encountered," Derek said, clicking to a new slide, "comes primarily from older landowners who don't grasp modern agricultural economics. They think tradition matters more than profit margins." He laughed. The investors joined him, as if sentiment could compete with quarterly returns. Maggie's hand had gone rigid in mine. "My daddy farmed 60 years, I said quietly. The laughter stopped. Derek turned, eyebrows raised. "I'm sorry?" "You mentioned tradition. My father farmed the same land his father did, 60 years. Never missed a harvest." "Yes, well," Derek's smile tightened. "That's exactly the kind of admirable stubbornness we're trying to move beyond. No offense." "None taken." After all," Derek's addressed the investors again, dismissing me. "Progress requires difficult conversations. Some people cling to the past, others embrace the future. Our job is to make the transition as painless as possible." The final slide appeared. Land acquisition deadline, April 15th, 2025. "Questions?" Derek asked. The investors had none. They shook his hand, glanced at me with polite disinterest, and drifted toward the catered shrimp. The truck cab was silent until we hit the county road. Maggie stared at her hands, still trembling slightly. "I'm sorry," she said finally. "He's always condescending, but tonight, don't apologize for him. He had no right to talk to you that way, to talk about farmers that way." She twisted toward me. "Frank, I swear I didn't know he was planning this presentation. The expansion, the April deadline, he kept it quiet from the community relations team." I turned on the heat. The blower rattled, pushing lukewarm air that smelled of diesel and old coffee. "How much land are they targeting?" He said 23,000 acres. Her voice was careful. Why? Just curious? Frank? I heard him mention spring planning deadlines. Made me wonder. I kept my eyes on the road, watching ice crystals glitter in the headlights. How much does Derek know about who owns the land he's planning to develop? She was quiet for a long moment. Why? Derek called Maggie into his office 3 days after the holiday party. I was at the feed store when she texted. Need to talk tonight. Not good. She came home past 7, her face pale in the porch light. Inside, she dropped her briefcase by the door and stood there, coat still buttoned, breathing like she'd run a mile. He wants me to help him identify vulnerable sellers. I poured coffee. The percolator hissed on the stove, filling the kitchen with bitter warmth. Vulnerable how? Elderly. Widowed. Financial trouble. She finally moved to the table, sank into her chair. He gave me a list of names. 15 farm. Said I should use your connections to find out who's desperate enough to take a low offer. Through the window, wind scraped ice across the barn roof. The sound made me think of my father's funeral, sleet falling on February earth, too frozen to dig. He said this specifically? Not in those words. He's too smart for that. And she pulled a folder from her briefcase. He talked about community intelligence and relationship leveraging. Said my Q1 performance review depends on identifying willing partners. I opened the folder. Spreadsheets. Names I'd known 40 years, Jim Peterson, the Kowalski brothers, Eddie Marsh's cousin up in Monroe County. He CC'd the regional VP, Maggie said quietly. Made it official. Either I deliver actionable intelligence or... She didn't finish. Or what? He mentioned restructuring. Said the company needs team players who understand that personal feelings can't interfere with progress. Her hands shook around the coffee mug. Frank, I can't lose this job. We need the insurance, the mortgage. I'm 3 years from investing in the retirement plan. I studied the names. Beside each one, Derek had noted estimated land value and motivation factors. Jim Peterson, recent widower, medical debt, Eddie's cousin, behind on equipment loans. What did you tell him? That I'd think about it. She met my eyes. I'm not going to do it. I'll quit first. But I wanted you to know what he's planning. These people are our neighbors. The kitchen clock ticked. Outside, our old barn cat yowled, wanting in from the cold. Don't quit, I said. Frank, not yet. Let me think about this. The Bluebird Diner smelled like coffee and bacon grease at 6 in the morning. Cal Brennan sat in his usual booth by the window, reading the farm report. I slid in across from him. Saw Maggie's car at the office late last night, he said without looking up. Everything okay? Agrotech's making moves. That got his attention. He folded the paper, and Joanne appeared with the pot, pouring without asking. She owned the place, knew everyone's business before they did. What kind of moves? Cal asked. I told them about Derek's list, about the April 15th deadline, about Maggie's performance review. Eddie Marsh came through the door halfway through my explanation, stamping snow from his boots. He caught the tail end and slid into the booth beside Cal. That son of a bitch came to see me last week, Eddie said. Offered cash for my equipment inventory. Said he'd throw in a consulting contract, 20 hours a month at twice my current rate. All I had to do was recommend Agrotech to my customers. What did you say? Joanne asked, coffee pot still in hand. Told him to get the hell out of my shop. Eddie's jaw was tight. But Frank, he's hitting everyone. The Kowalskis got a letter. Jim Peterson got a visit. They're offering just enough cash to look generous, but the lease terms... He pulled a paper from his coat. Look at this. I read the contract Eddie had been shown. Small print buried in the middle. Arbitration clauses, automatic renewals, penalty fees for early termination. It's a trap, I said. It's systematic. Cal's voice was quiet. He glanced at Joanne, who nodded and disappeared into the kitchen. When she returned, she locked the front door and flipped the sign to closed. What I'm about to tell you doesn't leave this booth, Cal said. Agrotech submitted a loan application to the bank, $8 million, operating capital for their expansion. The diner went still. Even the grill stopped hissing. When? I asked. 2 weeks ago. Board votes on it March 15th. And Cal wrapped both hands around his mug like he was cold. They need the money by April 1st to make their planting deadline. Without it, their whole expansion plan collapses. Eddie leaned forward. Can the board turn them down? If we have cause. Cal looked at me. If we had evidence of predatory lending practices, coercive contracts, exploitation of vulnerable populations. Through the diner window, I watched a semi roll past, chains clanking on ice. The bank sat across the street, its brick facade dark in the early morning. Frank, Cal said carefully, the board meets in 6 weeks. That's not much time to build a case. It's enough. Joanne refilled our cups. The coffee smelled burnt, bitter, Real. You know something we don't, Eddie said. It wasn't a question. I thought about Maggie's folder, about Derek's list, about my father's land and his father's before him. I know Derek Chen didn't do his homework, I said, and I know April 15th is going to be a very interesting day. Cal studied me for a long moment. Then he smiled. I always liked your daddy, he said. Patient man, never rushed a decision, but when he moved smart. The morning sun broke through the clouds, hitting the bank's brass door plate. March 15th, 6 weeks. Derek thought he was squeezing old farmers. He didn't know one of them was squeezing back. The county courthouse smelled like old paper and lemon oil. Nora Sykes sat behind her clerk's desk, reading glasses perched on her nose, surrounded by filing cabinets that predated computers by half a century. Franklin Holloway. She smiled when I walked in. Haven't seen you since the tax assessment hearing. Been quiet. Quiet's your specialty. She closed the ledger she'd been updating. What brings you in? This about agrotech? Word traveled fast in a county of 8,000. They filed lease applications last month, I said. Thought I'd see what land they're targeting. Nora pulled her glasses off, studied me. We'd grown up on neighboring farms. She remembered my father helping hers replace a barn roof in '76, remembered my mother bringing casseroles after Nora's husband passed. Applications are public record, she said finally. But you already know that. And she stood, joints creaking, and moved to a filing cabinet marked Land Leases, Current. Her fingers found the right drawer without looking. 22 applications submitted December 20th. She pulled the folder. All subject to approval pending lessor consent. She spread the papers on her desk. I scanned the property descriptions. Northeast 40 of the Peterson place. The Kowalski brothers' south parcel, Eddie's cousin's timber lot. Who's listed as current lessor? I asked. Nora's smile was thin. Well now, that's interesting. She pulled a second folder from a different cabinet, this one labeled Property Ownership, Holloway. According to county records, 80% of these parcels are leased from Effa Holloway Estates. The courthouse radiator clanked, pumping dry heat into the cold room. Derek Chen never checked ownership? Appears not. Nora tapped the papers. He assumed, like most folks from outside, that the farmers he's dealing with own their land outright. He didn't look at the lease chain, didn't see your name on the deeds. My father had started buying distressed farms in the '80s when interest rates killed half the county. Paid cash, offered long-term leases back to the original families. Let them keep farming, keep their dignity. Most people forgot he owned anything beyond our home quarter section. There's something else, Nora said. She unlocked a drawer, pulled out a leather folder brown with age. Your great-grandfather's original deed, filed 1890. I was updating the digital archives and noticed something in Section 7. She opened the folder carefully. The paper crackled, edges brittle. Handwritten text in fountain pen ink, faded but legible. Read here, she pointed. This land, held in trust by the Holloway family in perpetuity, shall remain in agricultural use. No portion may be subdivided for commercial or industrial development. This covenant runs with the land and binds all future owners, their heirs and assigns. I read it twice. That's still enforceable? In Ohio, absolutely. Perpetual restrictive covenant, properly recorded. Nora's smile widened. Your great-grandfather was a lawyer before he was a farmer. He knew exactly what he was writing. Outside, a snowplow scraped past, the blade's metal shriek echoing off brick buildings. Frank, as Nora's voice dropped, the Holloway family has deep roots here. Land, law, bank board seats since 1923. She paused. People forget, but the records remember. She closed the folder, handed it to me. Section 7, she said. Might want to read it careful, might want to have a lawyer read it too. Thank you, Nora. Your daddy helped mine when no one else would. She squeezed my hand, her skin paper dry and warm. Some debts don't expire. Jason Miller knocked on my kitchen door 3 days later, just after dawn. He stood on the porch with snow on his shoulders, holding a manila envelope like it might bite him. Mr. Holloway, sorry to bother you so early. Coffee? He followed me in, grateful. The percolator was already going, filling the kitchen with bitter warmth. He sat at the table where my father used to sit, where his father before him settled disputes and made handshake deals. Derek Chen came by yesterday, Jason said. Made me an offer. He slid the envelope across the table. I opened it. Standard agrotech contract. 5-year lease with automatic renewal. Generous cash advance, $20,000, with equipment financing included. Sounds good, I said, scanning the fine print. That's what I thought. Jason rubbed his face. He was 28, third generation on 80 acres his grandfather homesteaded. But my wife said to bring it to you first. Her daddy mentioned you helped him once. I read slower. Found it in paragraph 12. Lessor retains right to modify lease terms annually based on commodity index adjustments. Translation: they could raise rent every year, tie Jason to debt service, squeeze until he couldn't afford to leave. See this clause? I pointed. Index adjustments. Know what soybeans went for in 2008? No, sir. $16 a bushel. Know what they're going for now? $9.50. Right. So if they adjust your rent based on 2008 numbers, and beans are selling at 2025 prices, I'd be underwater. Jason's voice went quiet. Jesus. There's more. I flipped pages. Early termination penalty. $10,000 if you break the lease before year 5. Equipment financing carries 18% interest. And this arbitration clause, I tapped the paragraph, means you can't sue. You'd have to settle disputes through their corporate mediator. Jason stared at the contract like it had grown teeth. He said it was industry standard, said everyone was signing. That true? I don't know. His hands shook around the coffee mug. The Kowalski brothers signed last week, but they're 70. They want out anyway. The kitchen clock ticked. Outside, cardinals called from the bare oak, bright red against gray branches. How long did he give you to decide? 72 hours. Said it's a limited time offer. Said if I don't sign, the opportunity goes to someone else. Jason met my eyes. Mr. Holloway, I need help. I can't afford to walk away from $20,000, but I can't afford to lose the farm either. I refilled his coffee. Thought about my father teaching me to read contracts, about my grandfather's covenant, about young men trying to hold on to land their families had bled for. Tell Derek you need 2 weeks. Tell him your lawyer's reviewing it. I don't have a lawyer. You do now. I stood, pulled my phone from my pocket. And Jason, don't let anyone rush you into selling your future. Not for $20,000, not for any amount. His shoulders straightened slightly. You think I should turn him down? I think you should make him wait. Let him sweat. Jason left with the contract unsigned, walking taller than when he'd arrived. I watched him drive away, then checked my phone. 3 missed calls, all from Derek Chen. I didn't call back. That afternoon, a voicemail came through. I played it on speaker while Maggie chopped vegetables for dinner. Derek's voice filled the kitchen, tight with irritation. Mr. Holloway, this is Derek Chen from Agrotech Solutions. I understand you're advising Jason Miller regarding our lease offer. I'd appreciate the courtesy of a conversation before you interfere with our business relationships. Jason mentioned you suggested he delay signing. I should inform you that several of his neighbors have already committed. The opportunity window is closing. I'd hate to see him left behind because of outdated advice from a pause. Well-meaning but uninformed sources. Call me. The message ended. Maggie set down her knife. He just threatened you. He tried. Frank, he's calling you uninformed. He's implying... I know what he's implying. She crossed to the table, sat down. What are you going to do? Through the window, the sun was setting behind the barn, painting the snow orange and gold. In 6 weeks, Cal's board would vote on Derek's loan. In 10 weeks, lease renewals would come due. Derek thought he was putting pressure on. He didn't know I'd been holding pressure for 40 years. Nothing, I said. Not yet. Derek's drone appeared over our northeast 40 on a Tuesday morning, buzzing like an oversized hornet. I was checking fence posts when I heard it. High-pitched whine cutting through the February wind. The machine hovered at 200 feet, camera gimbal swiveling. I stood still and watched it map every acre, every depression, every tree line. When it finally lifted and disappeared toward town, I walked back to the house and called Eddie. He just surveyed my land, I said. Without permission? Without asking. Eddie was quiet for a moment. He's surveying everyone. Did the Kowalski place yesterday, Jim Peterson's last week. He's calling it agricultural analysis, says it's public service. Public service. That's what he told the Chamber of Commerce. He's giving a presentation Thursday night, Modern Farming Technologies. Half the county's planning to attend. The chamber meeting room smelled like burned coffee and wet carpet. 75 people packed into seats meant for 50. Derek stood at the front beside a projection screen, wearing a different expensive suit but the same practiced smile. Maggie sat 3 rows ahead of me with her agrotech colleagues. She hadn't known I'd be there. When she spotted me, her face went pale. Thank you all for coming. Derek clicked his remote. A satellite image appeared. Our county from above, parceled and color-coded. What you're looking at is the future of agriculture in this region. Green indicates optimally managed land. Yellow indicates underperforming parcels. Red indicates critical inefficiency. Most of the screen was yellow and red. Now, I know change is uncomfortable. His voice carried practiced sympathy. Many of you have deep ties to traditional farming methods. Your fathers farmed, your grandfathers farmed. That history matters. He clicked again, a graph showing declining yields. But sentiment doesn't pay bills. Data does. Our drone surveys use multispectral imaging, AI-driven soil analysis, and predictive modeling. We can identify problems before they impact yield. We can optimize every acre. An older farmer in the back row, Pete Larson, raised his hand. How much does this drone service cost? Excellent question. For agrotech partners, it's included in your lease agreement. For others, Derek smiled. Oh, well, that's why we're encouraging partnership. You mean selling, Pete said flatly. I mean, collaborating. Bringing this community into the 21st century. Derek's eyes scanned the room, landed on me. Some landowners resist progress. They believe walking a field with a shovel is superior to satellite imaging. They think experience trumps data. A few people turned to look at me. I kept my expression neutral. Take this parcel. Derek clicked to an aerial photo. My land, captured by his unauthorized survey. 400 acres, prime bottomland. Current management shows suboptimal nitrogen distribution, irregular drainage patterns, and outdated crop rotation. He'd labeled it Holloway property, traditional management. Now look at this analysis. Another click. Heat maps, soil composition charts, yield projections. Our modeling suggests this land is operating at 62% efficiency. With proper management, it could produce 40% more revenue. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Derek let them build. I'm not criticizing, he said, voice dripping false respect. Mr. Holloway, Frank, represents a generation that built this community. We owe him gratitude. But gratitude doesn't mean we should follow outdated practices into the economic decline. The room temperature felt like it had dropped 10 degrees. Maggie sat frozen in her seat. Our position at Agrotech is simple. Data beats guesswork. Technology beats tradition. Progress beats nostalgia. Derek smiled at the crowd. The question each of you faces is whether you'll be part of the future or a casualty of the past. Maggie didn't come home until after 9. When she walked in, her face was blotchy, eyes red-rimmed. She dropped her briefcase and coat on the floor, stood in the kitchen doorway like she'd forgotten how to move. He called me into his office after the presentation, she said. Her voice was hoarse. With the regional VP and HR director, I poured whiskey, handed her the glass. She drank it without seeming to taste it. He said, she stopped, pressed fingers to her temples. He said, you're creating a conflict of interest, that I'm allowing personal relationships to interfere with company objectives, that I'm undermining community relations by enabling resistance to Agrotech's expansion. Well, what did HR say? They took notes, asked me to explain our relationship, asked how much I knew about your land holdings, asked if I'd shared confidential company information with you. Her hands shook. Frank, they wrote everything down. It's documented now, official. The radiator clanked, struggling against the cold seeping through old window frames. Derek said, her voice cracked. He said either you stop interfering with their leases or I'm getting restructured by March. He called it performance-based realignment. Said the company needs team players who understand that business comes before personal loyalty. She set down the glass, wrapped her arms around herself. He CC'd corporate on an email before I left. Subject line, concerns regarding employee conflicts of interest and potential nepotism. I read it on my phone in the parking lot. He detailed every farmer you've talked to. Jason Miller, the Kowalskis, Eddie's cousin. He's building a case that I'm feeding you insider information. Are you? No, Frank, I've been careful. I haven't. She stopped. But it doesn't matter what's true. What matters is what he can make look true. I stood, moved to the window. Outside, snow was starting again, small flakes catching the porch light. I've worked there 11 years, Maggie said quietly. 11 years of 60-hour weeks and performance reviews and playing politics. I'm 3 years from full vesting, 3 years from pension. And he's going to take it all because you... She didn't finish. Didn't need to. Because I what? Because you won't just let this go. Her voice rose. Frank, I know what he's doing is wrong. I know he's exploiting people. But we can't fight Agrotech. They have lawyers and money and corporate backing. We have... What? Your father's land and your stubbornness? We have more than that. Do we? She was crying now, angry tears cutting through exhaustion. Because from where I'm sitting, all we have is my job slipping away and your pride keeping you from bending. The kitchen clock ticked. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the barn door. He said I have until March to fix this, Maggie said. His words, fix your husband or we'll fix both of you. Frank, I can't lose this job. We need the insurance, the mortgage. You know we can't afford... We don't need his insurance. She stared at me. What? I said we don't need it. Not his insurance, not his approval, not anything he's offering. That's easy for you to say. You're not the one whose career is Maggie. I turned from the window. Trust me. Trust you? Her laugh was bitter. You won't even tell me what you're planning. You disappear to the courthouse, to the diner, to God knows where. You let Derek humiliate you in front of 70 people tonight and didn't say a word. Now he's threatening my job. And you're asking me to just trust you? The question hung between us like the cold air seeping through window cracks. Yes, I said. She studied my face for a long moment. Then she picked up her coat, her briefcase. I'm sleeping in the guest room tonight, she said quietly. I need to think about what matters, about what I'm willing to lose. She climbed the stairs. I heard the guest room door close, lock. Outside, the snow was falling harder now, covering everything in cold white silence. Dawn came cold but clear, the kind of February morning that promises spring even while ice still crusts the ditches. I loaded my truck with the old equipment, soil probe, pH meter, moisture gauge, notebook, tools my father taught me to use, his father before him. Eddie's shop sat dark when I pulled up at 5:30. He came out carrying a thermos and a video camera, breath fogging in the pre-dawn air. You sure about this? He asked. Derek said his drone survey was definitive. He did. In front of the whole chamber. Eddie climbed into the passenger seat. Where are we going? The Kowalski brothers' south parcel, the one Agrotech's calling prime development land. We drove in silence, watching the sky pale from black to gray to rose. The land Derek wanted to convert sat 2 miles past the township line, 80 acres of what looked like level bottomland. His drone photos showed it green and promising. I parked at the field edge. Eddie set up the camera, while I pulled on rubber boots and grabbed the probe. What am I filming? He asked. Evidence. The ground was soft from yesterday's thaw, mud sucking at my boots. I walked 20 paces into the field, drove the probe down. It sank easy the first foot, then hit resistance. I checked the depth marker. 14 inches to hardpan. I moved 20 paces east, 12 inches. 20 paces south, 10 inches. What's that mean? Eddie asked, camera still running. Means the topsoil's shallow, probably clay hardpan underneath. I pulled the moisture gauge, tested 3 spots. The meter jumped into the red, and the water table's high, 6 inches below surface. In February, when everything's frozen. Right. I stood, surveyed the field. Come April, this whole parcel will be saturated. You couldn't put a foundation here without pilings, couldn't run equipment without tearing up the subsurface. It's farmland, not development land. Eddie lowered the camera. Derek's drone said this was ideal. Derek's drone measures surface reflection. It doesn't feel the soil, doesn't know what's underneath. I walked back toward the truck, leaving a trail of boot prints in the mud. My father used to say, you can't manage land from the sky. You have to get your hands dirty. Want me to show this footage to anyone? Not yet. I loaded the equipment, wiped mud off my hands with a shop rag that smelled like machine oil and cold air. Let Derek commit first. Let him tell investors this land's perfect. Then we'll show them what perfect actually looks like. Eddie grinned. Your daddy would be proud. My daddy would say I'm taking too long. Maggie was making coffee when I got home, still in her bathrobe. She'd slept in the guest room 3 nights running. We'd barely spoken beyond necessities. Pass the salt, I'll be late, did you pay the electric? I set the leather folder on the kitchen table, the one Nora had given me. What's this? Maggie asked, not moving from the counter. My great-grandfather's deed, Section 7. She poured 2 cups, brought them to the table, sat down across from me like we were strangers negotiating terms. I opened the folder, pointed to the handwritten clause, she read it twice, then looked up at me, something shifting in her expression. This prevents subdivision. Permanently. Derek's whole development plan can't happen, not legally, not on Holloway land. And she was quiet for a long moment, fingers tracing the old paper's edge. You've known this since January. Since Nora showed you. Yes. Why didn't you tell me? Because you needed deniability. If Derek asked what you knew, you could honestly say nothing. She set down her coffee cup, hard enough that it rattled against the saucer. I've been terrified for 6 weeks, Frank. Terrified I'd lose my job. Terrified we'd lose the house. And you let me think. Her voice cracked. You let me think we were helpless. We're not helpless. I know that now. She stood, paced to the window. Outside, the sun was climbing, turning frost to mist. What else haven't you told me? I pulled my phone out, opened to the bank's website, logged into the board portal, turned the screen toward her. I've been on the First Agricultural Bank board since 2013, chairman since 2019. She stared at the screen, at my name, at the top of the member list. Derek's loan request, I said. The $8 million he needs by April 1st. It comes to my board for approval March 15th. You're voting on his loan? I'm chairing the meeting where we vote on his loan. Maggie sat back down slowly, like her legs had stopped working. He doesn't know. Not yet. The leases. The land he needs. You own 80% of it. 83%? Or in the bank loan he needs to finance his expansion. I control the vote. She pressed both hands to her face, shoulders shaking. For a moment I thought she was crying. Then I realized she was laughing. "Oh my God," she said through her fingers. "Oh my God, Frank." He walked right into it. He assumed. Rich people always assume. They see an old truck and dirty boots and they stop looking. How long have you been planning this?" "Since December, since he called you a charity case." Oh, I met at her eyes. Nobody talks to my wife that way. The kitchen clock ticked. The radiator hissed. Maggie lowered her hands and her face was different. Not angry anymore. Not scared. Something harder. Something ready. "What do you need me to do?" "Keep your job. Keep your head down. Let Derek think he's winning." "And March 15th? "March 15th, we show him what losing looks like." My phone buzzed. Cal's name on the screen. I answered, put it on speaker. "Frank, board meets in 2 weeks. Derek just submitted his formal loan request. Numbers look good on paper." "You have concerns?" "I have questions." Cal's voice was careful. "About lending $8 million to a company that's currently pressuring half our depositors to sell. About conflict of interest. About due diligence." Maggie watched me across the table. "What are you thinking, Cal?" "I'm thinking Derek Chen should present his case to the full board. In person. March 15th, 10 a.m. A pause. "You planning to be there, Mr. Chairman?" "Wouldn't miss it." Good, because I got a feeling it's going to be an interesting meeting." The call ended. Maggie reached across the table, took my hand. Her fingers were warm, steady. "He's going to walk into that room thinking he owns the world," she said quietly. "He is, and you're going to destroy him. I'm going to give him a choice. Play fair or lose everything." Outside, the ice was melting from the eaves, dripping into mud that smelled like earth waking up. 2 weeks until Derek learned who really owned the ground under his feet. The town hall meeting room filled fast. By 7 o'clock, every seat was taken, and people lined the walls. I counted 70 farmers, maybe more. Derek had promised a presentation on the future of agricultural partnership. Maggie sat in the third row with her agrotech team. She didn't look at me when I slipped into the back corner, standing room only. The room smelled like wet wool and coffee from the percolator someone had set up by the door. Mayor Hendricks called the meeting to order, introduced Derek like he was visiting royalty. "Thank you all for coming." Derek's suit probably cost more than most people here made in a month. Behind him, a screen glowed with the agrotech logo. "Tonight, I'm excited to share our vision for this community's agricultural future." He clicked his remote. A satellite map appeared, our county in green and gold. "What you're seeing is potential. 23,000 acres of underutilized farmland. Your land, your neighbor's land. Land that could be producing 40% more revenue with proper management." He clicked again. Photos of modern equipment, drones, AI-controlled irrigation systems. "We've spent 6 months analyzing this region. Our data shows that traditional family farming, while admirable, is economically unsustainable. Average farmer age is 62. Equipment is outdated. Methods haven't changed since your grandfather's time." Pete Larson shifted in his seat. Jim Peterson stared at his hands. "But there's good news." Derek's smile was practiced, warm. "Agrotech offers a partnership model that preserves your connection to the land while bringing professional management and modern technology. We're not asking you to sell. We're asking you to evolve." He clicked through slides showing projected earnings, testimonials from farmers in other states, graphs trending upward. "We've already secured commitments from forward-thinking landowners in this community, the Kowalski brothers, the Henderson family, Pete Larson." He nodded at Pete, who looked uncomfortable. "These leaders understand that sentiment doesn't pay bills. Progress does." The radiator clanked, pumping dry heat into the packed room. "Now I know some voices in this community resist change." Derek's tone shifted, sympathetic but firm. "Older landowners who believe tradition trumps data, who think walking a field with a shovel is superior to satellite imaging." And he didn't look at me, but half the room did. "I respect that perspective. I truly do. These men built this community, their fathers and grandfathers before them." He paused. "But respect for the past doesn't mean we should follow outdated practices into economic decline." The new slide appeared. Expansion timeline, April 15th, deadline. "We have a narrow window. Spring planting waits for no one. We've streamlined our approval process. Farmers who sign by March 1st get preferred lease terms. After that," he shrugged, "opportunities close. We move to other regions, other partners." Someone in the front row raised a hand. "What happens to farmers who don't sign?" "Nothing happens. They continue as they are." Derek's smile never wavered. but they should understand that their neighbors will be prospering while they're struggling with outdated equipment and declining yields. Economics doesn't care about stubbornness. The room went quiet. Cold anger radiated from the older farmers. The choice is simple, Derek continued. Be part of the future or be left behind. Partner with progress or watch from the sidelines while this community transforms without you. He clicked to a final slide. Sign up tonight. Limited availability. We have representatives here with contracts ready to sign. Coffee and refreshments in the back. Let's build the future together. Applause came from the agrotech employees. A few younger farmers joined in, tentative. Most of the room sat silent. Mayor Hendricks stood. We'll open for questions now. 3 hands went up. Derek fielded them smoothly. Questions about lease terms, equipment financing, profit sharing. His answers sounded reasonable, generous even. He was good at this, I'd give him that. Then Nora Sykes stood in the middle section. Mr. Chen, I have a question about property ownership. Derek's smile tightened slightly. Of course. You mentioned the Kowalski brothers, the Henderson family, Pete Larson. You said they've committed to leasing their land to agrotech. That's correct. Forward-thinking partners. And you're seeking additional lease agreements tonight. We are. Nora pulled reading glasses from her purse, unfolded a paper. As county clerk, I maintain all property records. I'm looking at the lease applications you filed in December. Derek's expression shifted. Still professional, but wary now. I notice, Nora continued, her voice carrying clear in the silent room, that you're requesting lease modifications for 22 parcels. But you've listed the current lessors incorrectly on 18 of those applications. I'm sorry. The land you're asking farmers to lease to you, most of it isn't actually theirs to lease. Derek's jaw tightened. I think there's been some confusion. No confusion, Nora adjusted her glasses. The Kowalski South parcel, currently leased from F. Holloway Estates. The Henderson Timber Lot, F. Holloway Estates. Pete Larson's Northeast 40, also F. Holloway Estates. The room stirred. People turning to neighbors, whispering. In fact, Nora said, according to county records, 83% of the land you're targeting is currently under lease from the same entity. F. Holloway Estates. Derek's face had gone pale. I'm sure there's a paperwork issue. I stepped forward from the back of the room. Not fast, not aggressive, just moving into Derek's line of sight. No paperwork issue, I said quietly. Those records are accurate. Every head turned. Derek stared at me like I'd materialized from smoke. You, his voice was hoarse, you own... My family's been leasing land in this county since 1923. Bought most of it in the 80s when banks were foreclosing. Gave it back to the families who lost it. Long-term leases, fair rates. And I met his eyes across the crowded room. You didn't check who owned what before you started making promises. The silence was absolute. Even the radiator seemed to hold its breath. Those leases come up for renewal April 15th, I continued. Same day you need signed commitments. But you can't lease what you don't control. And you can't control what you never bothered to research. Derek's throat worked. His expensive suit suddenly looked too tight. How much? He managed. Name your price. We can negotiate. This isn't a negotiation. Mayor Hendricks cleared his throat. I think we should... You said I was stuck in the past, I said to Derek, my voice still calm. Said I was blocking progress. Said sentiment doesn't pay bills. I let the words settle. You're right about one thing. Sentiment doesn't pay bills. But neither does arrogance when you don't do your homework. Derek opened his mouth, closed it, looked at his agrotech team, at Maggie, back at me. This isn't over, he said finally. No, I agreed. It's not. Board meetings March 15th, 10 a.m., First Agricultural Bank. You're expected to present your loan request in person. His eyes narrowed. What loan? How do you... See you there, Mr. Chen. I walked out before he could respond. Behind me, the room erupted in voices, questions, exclamations, the sound of everything Derek had built collapsing. Outside, the March night was cold and clear. Stars, bright overhead. My breath fogged in the air that smelled like thawing earth and distant wood smoke. My phone buzzed, a text from Cal. He didn't know. Jesus, Frank, he actually didn't know. Another from Eddie. That was beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. I climbed into my truck, started the engine, let it warm. Through the town hall windows, I could see Derek surrounded by his team, gesturing wildly, face red under the fluorescent lights. 2 weeks until he walked into the bank boardroom. He'd be prepared this time. Desperate, dangerous, good. The church basement smelled like burnt coffee and mildew. Wednesday night, and 40 farmers had shown up for what Pastor Mike called a community conversation. I sat in the back row, listening. I'm just saying. Tom Henderson stood near the front, hat in his hands. Some of us need the money. My equipment's 20 years old, my back's shot. Derek's offer would let me retire with something in the bank. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the folding chairs. He's exploiting you, Jason Miller said from across the room. Those contracts are traps. I showed you the clauses. You showed me Frank's opinion. Tom's voice rose. Maybe Frank's right. Maybe he's not. But it's my land to decide, isn't it? Or does Frank own that too? The room went cold. People shifted, avoiding my eyes. Pete Larson stood slowly. Tom's got a point. Frank, you helped a lot of us over the years. Nobody's denying that. But this feels like... He stopped, chose his words carefully. Like you're deciding what's best for the whole county. Like we don't get a say. That's not what he's doing, Maggie said from beside me. I'd asked her not to come. She'd come anyway. Isn't it? Tom turned to face us. He owns most of the land, sits on the bank board. Now he's telling us we can't work with Agrotech because he says their contracts are bad. Maybe they are. But maybe some of us are willing to take that risk if it means we can finally stop breaking our backs. Rain drummed on the basement windows, steady and cold. The furnace kicked on, rattling. I'm 71 years old, Jim Peterson said quietly. Everyone turned to listen. Jim rarely spoke in groups. My wife died last year. Medical bills cleaned me out. I got no kids to pass the farm to. Derek's offering enough that I could move to town. Live somewhere warm for once. Not worry about whether the tractor starts or the well runs dry. Jim? Eddie started. No. Jim's voice was firm. You're all younger. You got time. I don't. And Frank, he looked at me. I appreciate what your daddy did for mine in '76. I do. But that was 50 years ago. I got to think about now. About me. Pastor Mike cleared his throat. Maybe we should... He's hoarding the land. Tom's voice carried across the room. That's what this is. Frank bought up half the county when folks were desperate. And now he won't let go. Won't let anyone else have a chance? That's not fair, Jason said. Isn't it? Tom's face was red. He talks about protecting us. But protecting us from what? From making our own choices. From finally getting out from under. The accusation hung in the damp basement air. I felt everyone watching, waiting for my response. I stood slowly. The metal chair scraped against linoleum. You're right, I said. The room went silent. It's your land to decide, your choice. I looked at Jim, at Tom, at the others. I bought that land when you needed cash, leased it back so you could keep farming, thought I was helping. Maybe I was just controlling. Maggie's hand found my arm. I didn't look at her. Derek's contracts are bad. I stand by that, but Tom's right. It's not my decision to make. I pulled my keys from my pocket. Jim, you want out? Come by tomorrow. We'll tear up the lease. Sell to whoever you want. Jim's eyes went wide. Same goes for anyone else. I won't stand in your way. I walked toward the stairs. Behind me, confused voices rose. Questions, protests, someone calling my name. Outside, the rain had turned to sleet, ticking against the truck's metal roof. Maggie climbed in beside me, slammed the door. What are you doing? Letting go. Frank, they're right. I have been controlling this. Making decisions for people who should decide for themselves? She grabbed my arm. You're protecting them from a predator. Or I'm protecting my own pride, my father's land, my idea of how things should be. I started the engine. Maybe Derek's right. Maybe I am stuck in the past. You don't believe that. I don't know what I believe anymore. We drove home in silence. The sleet turned to rain, then back to sleet, the wipers struggling to keep up. Cal called at 11 that night. I was at the kitchen table, staring at my great-grandfather's deed, when the phone buzzed. Heard about the church meeting, he said. Word travels. Frank, listen. Derek submitted his formal loan presentation to the board. $8 million, like we thought. But there's something you need to see. I'm done, Cal. Let him have the money. Let him have the land. I'm tired. Look at your email. I'm sending you his application. I opened my laptop. The document loaded slowly. 40 pages of financial projections, market analysis, risk assessment. Page 37, Cal said. I scrolled, found it. A paragraph buried in the risk mitigation section. Project success contingent on securing land leases from F. Holloway Estates by April 15th. Alternative. Legal action to break existing lease agreements on grounds of restraint of trade. I read it twice. He's gonna sue you, Cal said. If he gets the loan, if you don't renew the leases, he's planning to sue for interference with business. Can he do that? His lawyers think so. They've got a whole section about it, arguing that you're using your land ownership to create an illegal monopoly, that you're restraining free trade. Through the kitchen window, lightning flickered. Thunder followed, distant and low. There's more, Cal said. Page 40. He's claiming the leases you wrote in the 80s are unconscionable, that your father took advantage of desperate farmers. He wants a judge to void them retroactively. My father's face flashed in my mind. His careful handshake deals. His refusal to foreclose when other banks were seizing everything. He's calling my father a predator. He's desperate. The presentation's due March 15th. If the board approves the loan, he gets $8 million in a legal war chest. If we deny it, he loses everything. Right. Cal paused. Frank, this isn't just about leases anymore. If he gets that loan, if he starts suing, he could tie up the land for years, cost you hundreds of thousands in legal fees. Even if you win, the damage, I'll be there March 15th. What are you going to do? I looked at the deed, Section 7. My great-grandfather's covenant, written in fountain pen ink that had outlasted 3 generations. I'm going to give him the choice I should have given him from the start. Play fair or face the consequences. And if he chooses wrong, then we show him what consequences look like. The call ended. I sat in the dark kitchen, listening to rain hammer the roof. Upstairs, I heard Maggie moving around. Footsteps on old floorboards, then her voice, soft. Frank? I turned. She stood in the doorway, backlit by the hall light. I heard you on the phone with Cal. She came down the stairs, wrapped in a bathrobe. Derek's planning to sue. He is. She sat across from me. You knew this would happen. I hoped it wouldn't. But you prepared for it anyway. She reached across, touched the leather folder. The covenant, the board seat, the lease ownership, you've been building this for months. Since December, since he humiliated you at that party. Frank, she took my hand. I need to tell you something. Her voice had changed, careful, measured. I've known, she said quietly, about the board seat, about the land, about your plan. I stared at her. Not everything, but enough. Cal's wife mentioned you were bank chairman back in January. I saw the county records on your computer in February. She squeezed my hand. I didn't say anything because I knew you needed me to have deniability, to be able to honestly say I didn't know if Derek asked. Maggie? But tonight, at the church, when Tom said those things, when Jim talked about giving up, I couldn't let you think you were alone. Her eyes shone in the dim light. Whatever happens March 15th, we're in this together, like always. Outside, the storm was building, thunder closer now, lightning turning the kitchen white for an instant. He's going to fight, I said. Let him. Her voice was steel underneath the softness. We'll fight back. It could cost us everything. Not everything. She stood, pulled me up with her. Not the things that matter. We climbed the stairs together. In the bedroom, rain lashed the windows. The old house creaked and settled, holding against the storm, the way it had held for 160 years. March 15th was 10 days away. Derek thought he was walking into a loan approval meeting. He was walking into a reckoning. The First Agricultural Bank boardroom smelled like furniture polish and old money. Mahogany table, brass fixtures, portraits of past presidents dating back to 1890. I arrived at 9:30, half an hour early. Cal was already there, arranging papers. Derek's in the lobby, he said quietly. Brought 2 lawyers and his CFO. Good. Frank? Cal set down his papers. You sure about this? I'm sure. The other board members arrived in 1s and 2s. Rita Henderson, whose family had farmed here since the 1850s. Tom Kowalski, who'd taken over his father's grain operation. Janet Pierce from the implement dealership. All of them knew Derek's presentation was coming. None of them knew I'd be chairing. At exactly 10 o'clock, Cal opened the door. Derek walked in wearing his most expensive suit, confidence radiating like cologne. His lawyers flanked him, carrying briefcases that probably cost more than most people's monthly mortgage. The CFO followed, rolling a presentation case. Derek's smile faltered when he saw me sitting at the head of the table. Mr. Holloway, his voice was careful. I wasn't aware you served on the board. Since 2013, chairman since 2019. The color drained from his face. His lawyers exchanged glances. Please, sit. I gestured to the chairs across from us. Outside, spring rain began tapping the tall windows, soft and steady. We're here to consider Agrotech's loan application. $8 million, operating capital for agricultural expansion. Derek sat slowly. His CFO set up the laptop, projector humming to life. Before we begin, I said, I want to make sure we understand what we're approving. Mr. Chen, walk us through your expansion plans. Derek cleared his throat, straightened his tie. When he spoke, his voice had regained its practiced smoothness. Thank you. As outlined in our application, Agrotech is positioned to revolutionize agricultural efficiency in this region. He clicked his remote. Graphs appeared on the screen. Our drone survey technology and eye-driven soil analysis have identified 23,000 acres of underperforming farmland. With proper management and modern equipment, we project 40% yield increases. Rita Henderson leaned forward. Where's this land located? Primarily in 3 counties. We've secured preliminary commitments from forward-thinking landowners who understand. You've secured commitments? I kept my voice level. Or you've requested lease modifications? Derek's jaw tightened. We're in active negotiations. With whom? Various property owners. The details are in Section 4 of our application. I opened the folder in front of me. I've read Section 4. You list 22 parcels, but you haven't listed the current lessors. One of Derek's lawyers leaned in, whispered something. Derek waved him off. The lessors are the farmers currently working the land. The Henderson family, the Kowalskis, the farmers working the land don't own it, I said quietly. They lease it from F. Holloway Estates. Derek's CFO went pale. The lawyers stopped pretending to look at their notes. 83% of your target properties, I continued, are currently under lease agreements with my family's estate. Those leases renew annually. Next renewal date is April 15th. Tom Kowalski whistled low. Janet Pierce made a note on her pad. The loan you're requesting, I said, depends on land you don't control, land you never researched, land that, even if I wanted to lease it to you, can't be used for the development you're proposing. Oh, that's... Derek stood. His chair scraped loud against the hardwood floor. That's not accurate. Your surveys show surface reflection. I pulled out Eddie's soil test documentation. Ground truth shows something different. High water table, shallow topsoil, clay hardpan at 14 inches. The Kowalski parcel you're calling prime development land floods every spring. Ask Tom. Tom nodded. Always has. That's why we only run cattle on it. This is irrelevant, one of Derek's lawyers interjected. Our loan request is based on sound financial projections, built on land you can't access. And I opened the leather folder. My great-grandfather's deed. There's something else. Section 7 of the original Holloway deed, filed 1890. And I slid copies across the table to each board member. Derek snatched one, read it. His face went from red to white. This is a restrictive covenant, his lawyer said, voice tight. These can be challenged. In perpetuity, Rita Henderson read aloud. Land must remain in agricultural use, no subdivision for commercial or industrial development. She looked up at Derek. Your whole business model violates this covenant. We'll sue, Derek said. Restraint of trade, unconscionable contracts. We have legal grounds. You have a 40-page loan application that falls apart under basic due diligence. I kept my voice calm. You surveyed land from the sky without testing the soil. You negotiated leases with people who don't own the property. You planned development that violates a 135-year-old covenant, and now you want $8 million of this bank's money to fund it? The rain picked up, drumming harder against the windows. The boardroom clock ticked loud in the silence. Here's what I think happened, I said. You saw an opportunity. Rural community, aging farmers, land that looked underutilized from 30,000 feet. You assumed, like most people from outside assume, that we're simple, backward, easy to manipulate. Derek's hands clenched on the table edge. You didn't do your homework because you didn't think you needed to. You offered cash to desperate people and called it partnership. You threatened my wife's job when I started asking questions. I leaned forward. You made one mistake after another because you confused our patience with weakness. This is personal, Derek's lawyer said. You're blocking this loan because... I'm blocking this loan because it's bad business. This bank has served this community for 135 years. We don't lend money to companies that exploit our neighbors. Cal cleared his throat. Motion to deny the loan application on grounds of insufficient due diligence and unsound financial basis. Second, Rita said immediately. All in favor? Every hand went up except Derek's lawyers, who weren't voting members. Motion carries. Application denied. Derek stood so fast his chair tipped backward. You can't... I have contracts. I have commitments. I need that money by April 1st, or you default on your expansion plans, I finished. I know. You planned this. His voice shook. From the beginning, the December party, the town hall, all of it. You let me... He stopped, chest heaving. You destroyed my company. No, you destroyed your company when you tried to exploit people you should have partnered with. I stood, gathering my papers. But you still have a choice, Mr. Chen. What choice? You've taken everything. Restructure agrotech, real partnership with local farmers, profit sharing, fair leases, hire local management who understand the land. I met his eyes. Do that, and when your leases come up for renewal, April 15th, we'll talk. Do it right, and maybe this community will give you a second chance. And if I don't? Then you go back to your investors and explain how you lost $8 million in funding because you couldn't be bothered to check who owned what. Derek was gone, lawyers trailing behind him when Maggie appeared in the boardroom doorway. She'd been waiting in Cal's office. "Is it done?" she asked. "It's done." She crossed to where Derek's presentation still glowed on the screen, pulled a USB drive from her purse. "Then I think the board should see this." She plugged it in. Audio files appeared. Her finger hovered over the first one. "December through February," she said. "Every meeting where Derek threatened my job. Every conversation where he told me to use you to pressure farmers. Every time he called you people backward and exploitable." She looked at the board members. "I've been documenting everything, for insurance and for evidence." But Cal listened to 30 seconds of the first file. Derek's voice, crystal clear, saying, "Make your husband useful, or we'll find someone who can," then held up his hand. "That's enough." "Janet, you still have contacts at the State Labor Board?" "I do. Mr. Chen might want to talk to his lawyers about wrongful termination exposure." Cal looked at Maggie. "You've been recording him for 3 months?" "Since January. When I realized Frank was building something, I figured he'd need documentation." She squeezed my hand. "Partners, remember? I had your back while you had mine." Outside, the rain was letting up. Sunlight broke through clouds, turning the wet street to silver. Derek's truck was still in the parking lot. Through the window, I could see him on his phone, pacing, gesturing wildly. "Think he'll take the deal?" Rita asked. "Restructure and partner properly?" "No," I said. "He'll try to fight, sue, threaten, make noise. And when he does, we'll be ready." And I picked up my great-grandfather's deed. Some foundations are built to last. This one's been standing since 1890. It'll stand a while longer. Cal walked us to the door. "Your daddy would be proud, Frank." My daddy would say I took too long. Maybe. But he'd also say, "You did it right." Maggie and I walked to the truck together. The air smelled like rain and fresh earth and something else. Something green and growing, like spring finally arriving after a long, cold winter. "It's really over?" she asked. "The first part is. The rest depends on what Derek chooses." And if he chooses wrong?" I helped her into the truck, climbed in beside her. Through the windshield, I could see Derek still pacing, still talking, still trying to save something that was already lost. Then April 15th, I said he learns what consequences look like. Derek tried suing in late March. His lawyers filed a restraint of trade complaint, claiming I'd used my land ownership to create an illegal monopoly. The judge dismissed it in 48 hours. Turned out, a 135-year-old covenant is hard to argue against. Agrotech's regional VP showed up 3 days later. Not Derek, he'd been reassigned to other projects. The VP met with Cal, with Mayor Hendricks, with a delegation of farmers at the Bluebird Diner. By April 10th, they had restructured. Local management, profit-sharing agreements, fair lease terms drafted by lawyers who actually read the fine print. Jason Miller got hired as their community liaison, $23 an hour plus benefits. Derek left town April 12th. Someone saw him loading boxes into his truck at 2 in the morning. Drove toward the interstate, didn't look back. Maggie got promoted to VP of Community Relations 3 weeks later. Not because of what I did, because she'd been doing the job anyway. And the new management finally noticed. April 15th dawned clear and cool, the kind of morning that smells like possibility. I woke before the alarm, pulled on work clothes, and walked down to the Northeast 40 while the sky was still gray. The soil was perfect, warm enough to crumble in my hand, dry enough to plant. I drove the probe down, 18 inches of good topsoil, before hitting anything solid. Tested the moisture, right in the sweet spot. My father used to say, you can't rush spring, can't force it or fake it. You wait and you watch, and when the land's ready, it tells you. The land was ready. Behind me, I heard truck engines starting. Jason's new Ford, Eddie's diesel rig, Tom Henderson's ancient Massey that somehow kept running, year after year. Across the fields, tractors were warming up. The sound carried in the still morning air, steady, rhythmic, the sound of work about to begin. Maggie's car pulled up at the field edge. She climbed out carrying 2 thermoses, steam rising in the cool air. "Thought you might want coffee," she said. We stood together watching the sun clear the tree line, turning frost to mist. In the distance, Jason's tractor made the first pass, diesel smoke trailing behind, the smell mixed with earth and dew and coffee. "You think Derek learned anything?" Maggie asked. "No, but the land did." She smiled, leaned against me. "That doesn't make sense." "Sure it does. Land remembers who respects it and who tries to exploit it. Derek's gone. We're still here." A red-tailed hawk circled overhead, riding the morning thermals. In the oak beside the fence line, robins were singing, spring sounds constant as seasons. Jason finished his first row and pulled up beside us, climbed down from the cab. He was wearing the work boots I'd given him, Good leather, broken in, but solid. Same kind my father had worn. Mr. Holloway. He pulled off his cap, respectful. Ground feels good. It is good. You're making a clean line. Trying. He hesitated. The agrotech people asked me to oversee their planting operations. All 3 counties. Said they need someone who knows the land. What did you tell them? Said I'd think about it. He looked at the tractor, at the field, at me. Wanted to ask your advice first. I handed him the soil probe. Take this. Test before you plant. Walk the fields before you sign anything. Make sure they listen when you tell them what the land needs. He took the probe like I was handing him something sacred. And Jason, when your kids are old enough, you teach them the same way. Measure twice. Check the records. Respect what came before. Yes, sir. He climbed back in the tractor and we watched him work. Straight rows, even depth. The kind of planning that comes from caring about the result. Maggie poured coffee into the thermos cap, handed it to me. The steam smelled like home. You going to teach anyone else? She asked. Pass down what your father taught you. Maybe. I sipped the coffee, felt the warmth spread. If there's anyone worth teaching, there is, she smiled. A whole county full of them. You just had to remind them what they already knew. The sun climbed higher, warming the earth. The sound of tractors grew louder as more farmers joined in. Spring planting, the way it had been done for 100 years, the way it would be done for 100 more. My boots were muddy, my hands smelled like soil and diesel, and standing there with my wife, watching young farmers plant seeds in ground that would outlast us all, I finally understood what my father had been trying to teach me. Some battles you win with noise and force. Others you win by staying, by planting, by trusting that the land remembers who loved it, and teaching the next generation to do the same. 3 weeks later, I sat on the porch at dawn with my coffee. The rain gauge showed 2 inches from last night's storm. Good for the seedlings. Robins were pulling worms from the garden, and somewhere across the fields, I heard Jason's tractor starting up for another day. Maggie came out with her own cup, settled into the chair beside me. We didn't talk, didn't need to. After 35 years, some conversations happen in silence. My great-grandfather's deed sat in its frame now, hanging in the kitchen, where we could see it every morning. Section 7, still binding after 135 years. Not because it was controlling, because it was true. Some men think power comes from volume, from expensive suits and drone surveys and $8 million loans. They're wrong. Real power comes from knowing the land, from walking it in rubber boots and testing the soil with your hands, from keeping promises your grandfather made, from staying when staying is hard. Derek thought silence meant surrender, thought patience meant weakness. He learned different. The land doesn't care about your MBA or your quarterly projections. It cares if you'll be here through drought and flood, winter and spring, if you'll plant, not just for yourself, but for whoever comes after. My father knew that. His father before him. And now, watching the sun rise over fields that would outlast us all, I finally understood what they'd been trying to teach me. Some victories don't shout, they just grow.